Let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're tackling something that I know hits incredibly close to home for so many of us. We're diving into a really insightful essay called The Arithmetic of Discontent. It basically unpacks that quiet but honestly intense frustration of being a private sector salary taxpayer. We're talking about the money you earn, the taxes you pay, and the actual lived reality of what you get in return. We've got some fascinating data to go through, so let's get into it.
Ever wonder why your annual salary increase never actually makes you feel any richer? It's a highly relatable question, right? You work your tail off, you finally get that yearly bump in pay, but somehow your bank account just doesn't seem to reflect that upward mobility. So what's happening behind the scenes? Well, the source material we're looking at maps out these hidden structural realities. It's this relentless math that slowly but surely eats away at your hard-earned income. And spoiler alert, it's not just in your head. It is a very real, systemic issue.
Let's look at the daily grind mapped out in our source essay. Honestly, this might look remarkably like your own morning. The alarm rings way before dawn. You join the endless traffic, crawling through half-finished flyovers and choked intersections. Then, you spend the next 9, maybe 10 hours producing value for a private company. And then comes step 3. The tax is deducted at source, good old TDS. Before the money even hits your account, before you can even look at it, a massive slice of your earnings is just extracted by the government. By the time that Form 16 arrives, the numbers are starkly clear.
And here is where our source presents a pretty stark juxtaposition. Think about your tax burden for a second. You're paying a progressive income tax. If you're earning at higher levels, bam, you're hit with surcharges and cess. Plus, you're paying GST on literally almost everything you buy. But take a look at your return. What exactly is this massive contribution buying you? Often, it's deeply inadequate. We're talking public toilets that are either filthy or just don't exist. Government hospitals that are completely overcrowded with unpredictable quality. In so many cities, you're dodging potholes on the road, treating your top water with extreme caution, and breathing in hazardous air on your daily commute.
Section 1. Where exactly does the money go? So, if those visible civic amenities are lagging so far behind the taxes collected, where exactly are all these tax rupees flowing? Well, to answer that, let's look at the foundation of the government's budget, the central government receipts. Look at this. Income tax makes up roughly 21% of the central budget. Corporation tax sits at 18%, and GST is 15%. This proves without a doubt that the formal salaried class isn't just a participant in the economy. You are a cornerstone contributor. You are heavily funding the entire formal tax system.
But here's where the story takes a bit of a turn. Let's look at how that money is actually spent. Massive chunks of the budget, they are not going toward direct, visible civic improvements in your neighborhood. Actually, 22% goes straight to the state's share of taxes. Another 20% goes solely to paying off interest on past debt. 11% goes to defense. Now, the money doesn't just vanish into a void, right? It's funding necessary macro-level functions like interest, defense, and major capital projects. But it means that the high-quality services a middle-class taxpayer actually experiences in daily life, they just aren't the primary outputs of this system.
The reality of these spending priorities is captured by a shockingly low number, less than 0.3%. According to the source material, the Union Health allocation for 2026-27 is about 1.06 lakh crore rupees. Now, that sounds like a massive number, sure, but it represents well under 0.3% of the GDP at the center alone. Even if you combine the center and states, public health spending just hovers around 1.5 to 2% of GDP. That is well below the national health policy target, and honestly, it's lower than many global peers. And education spending is similarly constrained when you compare it to the massive needs of the population.
So you might be wondering, why do citizen-level outcomes still lag so far behind, even when absolute spending rises on things like infrastructure? Well, the source highlights a few structural realities. First off, just the immense scale of the population stretches resources incredibly thin. Then you've got massive implementation gaps and underutilization of funds in certain schemes. Throw in system leakage and state-level political choices that sometimes prioritize direct cash transfers over actually delivering high-quality sustainable services, and you can really see why things are stalling at the ground level.
Which brings us to Section 2, paying for it twice.
Because those public services are lagging, the taxpayer is basically forced into a corner, paying what amounts to this invisible double tax. Think about it. You've already paid your income tax for basic civic needs, but because the public provision, like those overcrowded government hospitals, is basically unusable for your family, you are forced to pay out of pocket for a private substitute, like a super expensive private clinic. The same exact thing goes for education. Understaffed government schools mean you're paying costly private school fees, transport, and books just to keep your kids competitive. Even safe utilities. Contaminated tap water and smoggy air mean you're out there buying home water filters and air purifiers. The middle class is essentially forced to privatize its own survival.
And this right here perfectly explains why that salary bump we talked about at the very beginning feels so incredibly hollow. Private sector salary increments have hovered around 9% nominally, which roughly tracks inflation. So on paper, you aren't poor, but in your lived experience, the gains just vanish. Fuel, groceries, medical insurance, and the creeping costs of literally all those private substitutes we just looked at, they just keep climbing. Plus, the progressive tax system takes a larger share of every single increment you get. Surcharges literally feel like a penalty for working harder. Your real disposable income feels completely stagnant because at the end of the day, there's just no surplus left for a genuine improvement in your standard of living.
Our source material summarizes this quiet exhaustion perfectly with this quote. It says, "The cumulative effect is a quiet, grinding sense that the social contract is one-sided." And that hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? You see informal incomes totally escaping the tax net. You see welfare transfers funded by your taxes that don't actually improve the services you use. The system extracts from the formal, visible, salaried class, delivers pretty mediocre public goods, and basically leaves you to fend for yourself.
This brings us to the absolute core thesis of our explainer today. It's a concept the source calls the lived arithmetic. Now, this isn't about some abstract political ideology. It is the concrete mathematical realization that you are doing everything right. You're selling your hours, you're applying your hard-earned skills, you're paying your withheld taxes, but none of it has actually translated into a cleaner, safer, more functional civic environment for the family you're trying to raise. The deductions keep coming, but the services remain practically unavailable.
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. We've looked at the macro budget data, and we've connected it directly to the micro daily reality of the commuter stuck in traffic. If the system rigorously extracts your income, yet routinely leaves you to privately fund your own basic health care, your children's education, and even the clean water you drink, is the social contract broken? It is a heavy question for sure, but an absolutely essential one for anyone navigating the arithmetic of discontent. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning the data around you.